Hi, and welcome to the Wild Learners channel, episode 1. Today we're going to be talking about outdoor play and risky play, because those two things go hand in hand, as you will see later in this episode. If you follow us, I would love that. If you could like this video, I'd love that too. And also commenting in the section below, if there's things you want to hear more about, we could always do part 2 to go deeper in things, or if there's other new topics you want to explore, I'd love to hear from you and know what it is you're looking for. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, like I said, is going to be outdoor play and risky play. We're going to talk about why outdoor play. Why do kids need outdoor play? What are the benefits to having outdoor play? We're also going to be talking about components of our play space outside. What things should we have? Are there things that maybe we don't need or shouldn't actually have in our outdoor spaces? And we're going to be talking about risky play. And with risky play, we're going to be talking about risk analysis. We're going to talk about student autonomy. And then we're going to talk about communicating risk with our students. And then, of course, it wouldn't be complete without me also including some of my best resources for each of these topics. So those are just a little bit of the things that you have to look forward to. I'll also include some pictures after each topic that we talk about from my space here, so you can kind of get a visual of what I'm talking about. So I hope you're excited as I am. We're going to jump right into outdoor play. So why do kids need outdoor play? I mean, some of us already know, because if you think about your childhood, if you think about your happiest memory from being a child, is most likely going to be outdoors. I know mine was always climbing trees at my grandparents' house. That was something that always made me feel free, and I just loved doing that as a kid. But there's a lot of data and science behind why we should be letting kids outdoors and spending a considerable amount of time outdoors. And some of these things are that it invites learning connections. It makes new context in different content areas. We always think of science. I mean, it's really easy to connect the outdoors with science, but you can connect math and English language arts into the outdoor classroom as well. You can also see the social interactions in kids really blossoming the more time that you spend outdoors. One of my favorite things is seeing how, so this fort behind me, and you'll see more pictures of it later. Some of these sticks or really small tree trunks are 8 to 10 feet. And the kids were working together to be able to build this, to accomplish this. And there was so much collaboration going on, and we're talking in mixed ages. So we have some just turned 5-year-olds, we have some almost 10-year-olds, and everything in between. And getting to listen to them collaborate is really important, because that's an important life skill that kids really need. And being able to do that on their own and figure that out together is really important. Obviously physical health. So as we know, data shows a lot of kids spend time watching TV and playing video games. And we've seen a lot of kids developing things like asthma, obesity, and other related health conditions because they're not getting as much time outside. And so getting that vitamin D from the sun, getting fresh air, getting that movement in is obviously really good for your body. Obviously, getting that movement in also means they're going to sleep really well at night. So getting a good quality night's sleep is going to help them be better learners. It helps kids learn to take appropriate risk. And we're going to be talking about that a lot more here to come. It's easy to also incorporate STEM skills into your outside classroom and playtime. And that's an easy way, too, to connect your learning inside to your learning outside. And that's a topic that I'm going to be talking about a lot more later on in this channel, because that's something that I really believe in doing, and I'll show you some of the ways that I do that. It reduces behavior. So something that I hear a lot of my friends that are still in public school, and honestly, something that I've even seen too over the last several years is behavior. So behavior is becoming more of an issue, and I don't think it has to do, I don't think there's just one reason. I don't think it's because we have bad parenting or things like that. I think that it's because we are entertaining children a lot more than they've ever been entertained in the past, instead of them learning to entertain themselves. And that lack of being able to self-regulate and be able to find what interests them is causing them to act out in ways that, aren't always the most positive. Well, allowing them to have this time outside and be able to engage in play and engage in collaboration and purposeful play actually decreases those negative behaviors quite a bit. So those are just a few of the benefits of being outdoors, but I'm sure that you can think of a lot more. And if there's a certain one that you want to talk about with the benefits, be sure to comment below and I'll be sure to talk about that too. So some components of the outdoor play space, and I'll have some pictures of our space in the video, is pretty basic really for me. So I didn't really want any man-made materials. I wanted our space to really be just nature. So it is kind of convenient for us because, as you can see, we do have a wooded area, and we also have a large grass area that we can play in. And that definitely helps. We have added quite a bit over here though, because there wasn't really a lot of good climbing trees. We have a lot of cherry, which grows straight up, and it's not great for climbing. So what we have done is we had a catalpa in our front yard that died. My husband used a bobcat and pulled different chunks over to the different areas of our play space for them to climb, cut smaller pieces for them to build with, and things like that. I think that having things that they can climb is really important. Having dirt to dig in is another really important one. Making sure that you just have some interesting things, like we have grapevines. Those are always really interesting. We have mulberries, which are always delicious and interesting. And just making sure you have just areas devoted to being kid friendly. And what I mean by that is, if you have an area that maybe you're trying to restore, I would not allow children in that area. It needs to be an area that you're okay with the grass dying, holes being dug, trees maybe having branches broken off, and things like that. It needs to be an area where you can let them play, let them be, and not have to worry about that habitat. Having access to water is really important. So we don't have, we have outside wells here on the farm, but I always make sure my kids bring their water bottles out. So if that's something that you don't have access to as an outside like water pump like we have to fill water bottles, make sure that you do have some type of like cooler that has water for them, because being outside, they do need access to that water. As I mentioned, logs, tree stumps are really important. One of the favorite things that my students like to do is build shelters like this one. There's several of them, and you'll see them in the pictures. They've even dug holes down deep and then put like bark and stuff on top of it and kind of made like a in-ground shelter. So allowing kids to do that is really important. We also I do allow tools to be used. So we don't add any like man-made equipment. So we don't have like a play set or any of those things, but we do have spades, and we have shovels, we have rakes, I have bug jars and magnifying glasses and things like that. So I think of it as tools that enhance what's already out here. So we use the magnifying glasses and the bug jars to look at the different insects and things that we're finding. The spades for them to kind of dig smaller holes if they're wanting to build like tunnels for sometimes I like to make tunnels for like ants or different like beetles and stuff that they find. We have shovels, which you'll see the ginormous hole that they dug to make a fort, and things like that. A great resource on what components you need for your outdoor play space is Indiana Children and Nature Network. I love them. They have great conferences too, so I really encourage you to go check out their website. And then another question I get is, what if I don't have this, right? What if I don't have this? So another option for you is, I know a lot of parks are like city, as long as you're not, so you won't be able to dig holes there, obviously, because I have a policy of like leave no trace when we're on other people's land. But you can use those places, or even if you just have a backyard, just pull in some limbs, some logs, some big rocks and things like that, and kids will naturally find a way to create climbing spaces and things like that. So it really doesn't have to be fancy. Honestly, I believe the less that is in there, the better. It encourages more creative play and engagement with nature, and that's really what we're wanting. So that's as simple as it can be. or you can make it as complicated as you want to be. I think the more simple it is, the better it is for the creative learning experience and the connections that we can make with nature. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is risky play. So risky play is probably the biggest topic we're going to spend a lot of our time on. It's the one that I get the most questions on is, okay, so we do allow tree climbing. I do allow them to play with sticks. I allow them to run and jump over holes or logs or things like that. And a lot of questions I get about that is why? Like, why do you allow that when it has that risk? And to be honest, for me, the benefits far outweigh the risk, and we're going to really talk about those. One of the greatest inspirations for me to allow risky play, because I tend to be I came from public school and in private school, even Montessori. When you're in a formal school setting, your nature is to try to be as conservative as possible when it comes to risk, because of being liable and things like that. But I read Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, which if you're into children and nature and nature-based play, I'm sure you've read it, and it's an amazing book. And it really changed my perspective, because I realized that myself as a child, I had a lot of autonomy in my play, and I naturally did those things. I naturally climbed trees, I pushed limits, and I realized like how that really helped me learn self-regulation and build confidence as an adult. And I look back on my childhood and I can see that pattern of how I became who I am because of being allowed access to that risk. So what is risky play? Let's talk about the definition first. And the definition is, it's thrilling and exciting play where children engage in risk without certainty. And that is from the book, The Power of Play. And I think that that's the perfect definition. There is no certainty when it comes to risk, right? We are engaging in it knowing that there's a certain level of control that we are giving up. And that's where a lot of parents and teachers draw the line, or like, nope, I can't give up that control. But this is what I'm going to do to encourage you. I'm going to tell you all the benefits so that you can see like why we need to allow children more autonomy. So allowing them to engage in risky play is obviously going to help their risk management skills. And that's a life skill. We don't want children to be afraid of everything. And we want children to know that they have the power to be able to approach a task and be able to complete it even with a healthy amount of fear. That helps build their self-confidence, and we obviously want confident adults. We want confident children. We want them to feel empowered and be able to make choices as adults and be able to weigh different issues that they're hearing around them and make good judgments. What I try to do is I try to focus on as safe as necessary. So that's not as safe as possible, right? If it was going to be as safe as possible, there would be like no tree, it'd be like public schools, no tree climbing, no playing with sticks, no rough play, things like that. And those are things that I do allow, but I do have some boundaries set for those things, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. I think that the most important part when I started thinking about what kind of risky play I was going to allow here at my school was what is going to actually be a beneficial and positive experience for the child, and how can I allow them autonomy over their play and act more as a guide than as like a ruler. So I wanted their outside time to really be them as teachers. They had control over their learning while we were in our outside time, and I was going to act more as a guide. So, like I said, some clear rules are set. So we talked about this on the first day when we're outside. We just sit in a circle. We look at the space around us, and I allow them to kind of start the conversation. So I'm like, okay, so what are some rules you think would be appropriate for our outside? Most of the time the students nail them on their own and I don't have to add any, but some that I make sure that we always hit is if you can't see me and I can't see you, then that's not a safe place for you to be. And to be honest, most of the time, because of wanting to be together, I don't really have this problem. Students stay where I can see them and they are engaging in making sure that they are near me and I can see them. Now, that doesn't mean that we're within like 20, 30, 40 feet of each other. Sometimes we could be like 20, 30 yards from each other, but I can see them. I'm able to get to them if I need to. Obviously in the woods, we're talking about a smaller space between us because of the density of the trees and not being able to see them. But over here in this side of the yard, it's very open and I can see them for quite a ways. And so, you know, they can go a little bit further on their own. And I think it's just kind of like letting them know that like they have that, they don't have to be beside me all the time. They can have some freedom, but still being able to monitor things and see what's going on. I also think that when it comes to tree climbing, that was probably the hardest for me because, as I mentioned, I loved to climb trees as a child. I would go as high as I could, and I realized that with my own children, I'm okay with that. With my own children, they can climb as high as they want, but while I have other people's children in my care, I found it really hard because, one, I'm not as young and spry as I used to be, so if a child gets stuck too high, I can't safely get them. Some children are really avid climbers and they can climb and get down by themselves. Some kids can climb to a certain height and then realize that they're really scared, and if you can't get them, that could be a potential problem. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to have this rule, but me personally, for our school time, well, we are here as a whole group, so not just my family, as a whole group, they can't climb higher than I can reach. And that's so that I can ensure if they get stuck, hung up, you know, there's a bug that bites them, or any situation comes up that I would need to be there right away, I can get them down and get them safe. But it still allows them to climb to a decent height. I know it's not fair. I'm 6 foot tall, so I can reach pretty high, and some of you may not have that height benefit. So you'll really just need to kind of figure out what's comfortable for you. We also talk about trees a lot, and I think this is another important part of autonomy is we talk about, okay, what trees are safe to climb? Like, how do we know that a branch can hold our weight? And like, so we talk about those things and we research those things so that they can make their own choices and know. If I come across a situation, so I have a student who is always trying to test what trees they can climb, and some of them just are not quite big enough yet, but he can get pretty high. And so he feels safe, even though I can clearly hear the cracking under his weight. But I don't want to take that autonomy away from him. I don't want him to feel like he's making a bad choice because the tree is holding him. I'm the one that feels unsafe. So I'm like, hey, I'm feeling kind of unsafe. Is there a different tree we can look for? We can look for it together if you don't know one. Usually they're like, oh yeah, I'll go over here. And they'll have another one that they go to. I like to do that because I don't want to instill fear in them where maybe it's not due. So that's just kind of a way that I handle it myself is, hey, I don't feel safe. Can we think about this alternative? And I'll try to give them an equal alternative to what they're doing. When it comes to the tools, I model how to use the tools before they're allowed to use them. So to be honest, like our first 2 weeks of school is just a lot of modeling and a lot of exploring and practicing those skills so that we can just be confident with them throughout the rest of the school year. I do live campfires because we are outside every day all through the winter, and we are in Indiana, so it can get pretty chilly up here. We're in northern Indiana. And so if it is going to be below 32 degrees, I'll have a campfire. And so the first 2 days before, you have to watch the weather. This is where being a teacher and having that planning and prepping beforehand is important. I'll notice that the weather is changing, and I'll say, okay, there's a good chance that within a few days, we're going to need to have a campfire. And so the few days before that, we'll talk about fire safety. We'll talk about our code of ethics around the fire and things like that. And I have been doing a fire with preschool, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth for 4 years now here at our school, way longer with other places. And I've never had an issue. Kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for. If we talk about expectations and we are modeling those behaviors ourselves, kids do so well. It's up to us adults to create a safe environment, though. So having a placement where your fire is out in the open, so nobody's having to like squeeze or like have tight space to get through, make sure there's plenty of area to walk around it, I think is really key. Because children want to move, they want to come to the fire, they want to leave, and being able to have that flow is really important to make sure nobody trips, falls, and things like that. I did mention that we do rough play. I think that's really important for boys, especially. I mean, I've seen it with our girls, but not quite the same as I have with boys. And I know that I mean, sometimes it does lead to it getting too rough, and that is the point where I step in. And this is just going to have to be based off of your comfort level. So for me, our biggest thing is they play hunters, or they play some other type of outside game where it requires chase. Chase is really popular with kids, obviously. And it will usually start out with like one soft touch, but as the game progresses and gets more competitive, you'll see a little bit more of that pushing or grabbing action come in. And what I try to do is I try to read everybody's faces. If everybody's smiling and laughing and everybody's engaging the same way, as long as people aren't like losing their balance or asking others to stop, I let the play continue. But once I start to see like there's not any smiling, or maybe somebody tripped and you can kind of see that they're a little bit fearful, or they're clearly saying, hey, stop, I don't want you to do that, let go of me or whatever, I put an end to it right away. And the students know that. And if I have to put an end to it, it's the end of it for the entire day. And so they tend to abide by the everybody's having fun rule really well, because they like to engage in that type of play. When it comes to sticks and rocks, I feel like kids are naturally going to want to throw them. And the only rule that I have around that is they can't throw the sticks and rocks when they have friends around. We have plenty of space here for everybody to spread out if throwing sticks is something that they want to do. And honestly, I would argue that it's a very healthy thing for kids to do. Then I let them. Another thing they like to do is they like to pretend that sticks are baseball bats, and they'll find like walnuts or acorns or whatever else is out in the woods, and they like to try to hit them, which is a really good skill, actually, and something that I really support, and I don't want to take that away from them. And so I just ask that, hey, you can't have friends near you. And it really hasn't been an issue. I haven't really even had to define that, because if they want to do an activity like that, they will go off into an area where there isn't anybody, and they can do that. If you're in a smaller space, that's something that you'll definitely have to take into consideration, because that might not be a safe option. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to risky play, so much of it is going to be based off of your comfort level. And I'm not saying that you should stay in that current comfort level. I definitely didn't. I definitely grew and tried to branch out. But I definitely think that you need to do what's comfortable with yourself first, and allow yourself to be open to changes, to be open to allowing more autonomy over the choices that they're making. As adults, we still have growing to do, and I think that as professionals, it's something that we need to be open to and really look at in a safe way. So that comes to my risk assessment. So every morning I do come out, and I think that if you have an outdoor space, it's imperative that you come out and make sure your space is safe. So what I check for is, you know, if we had wind or heavy storm, looking for those branches that are hanging. Those, we call them widow makers. Those are very unsafe, and that's outside of the children's ability to do anything about. So that's up to us to make sure that that area is safe. Something else that I have to make sure, because we have animals here, is that we don't have any wild visitors that we need to be concerned about. So, which can be kind of hard sometimes, because I'll do my morning check, and then later we'll come out, we'll be in the barn collecting eggs together, and all of a sudden, like, there's our possum friend, like, not happy with us that we're interrupting his egg breakfast. So being prepared for those kinds of situations is really important, but I think the most important thing you can do is just be proactive. So checking for limbs, making sure if you're using a public space that there aren't sharp objects or, you know, biomaterials laying around, and make sure that those things are picked up. And I think that that's the best that you can do. Beyond that, it's just watching, being very observant, making sure that you are not tuned out, like on your phone or reading a book. Like, I feel like outdoor play, you need to be engaged with the students. I think that's the best time to kind of ask questions, and that's where, if I find somebody is bored, and let kids be bored is I love that. I think kids need to be bored and figure out how to self-regulate that boredom. But I will be like, hey, and I'll just start poking at the ground, and it might not be anything. Like, there literally might not be anything there that I can see, but I'll just start poking at it with a stick, and then they get interested, and then they're now looking for whatever, you know, they're finding. And I think that being able to do that is really important skill. It keeps you engaged with your class. It lets you know what's going on around you, so that you can make sure that you are making that space as safe as possible, so that they can have autonomy over their learning. So I'm trying to keep this first video kind of short, and I apologize that I don't feel like I have this down quite as well as I want to yet. I'm still developing my video presence. This is very new to me, and sharing my content in this format is really different as well. I do want to keep the video short though, so if there were different topics, because I know that that was very basic, probably too basic for some of you, but if there's something you want to dive into deeper, I really want to know, and we can deep dive into that a lot more. Just comment, let me know what it is, and I'll make sure to start adding that. I have a whole list of things that people are really excited about, so we can start doing that and getting through all that stuff. I'm going to be posting on Mondays, and there'll be new content every Monday, and I'll be planning that weekly. So if there is something, I can get that on quickly if there's enough interest. Please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. That'd be really helpful, so I can feel like what I'm doing is actually making a difference and people are enjoying it. And if they're not, I can change it to be what you guys need it to be. So anyway, just thank you for your time. I hope this conversation was beneficial for you, and I look forward to talking with you guys more next time. Thanks. Bye.